Welcome into the Pump Fake, everybody. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you're listening wherever you get your podcast, leave a review. Thank you so much for tuning in. Jarrett Bailey with you, as always, joined by my friend Matt Lombardo. It's good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Jarrett, I'm doing great. Long time no see and long overdue coming on the Pump Fake. I'm excited to be here. Great week to join the show.
Yeah, no, I think the 1 o'clock window this week was maybe the best it's been all season. A lot of really good games, and we're starting to see, this is the time of year where the good teams separate from the bad teams, the mediocre teams as well. So, let's start with Lions Vikings though, because that was kind of the one that everybody circled in the 1 o'clock. It's like, all right, a divisional battle. Vikings came into this game undefeated, and it was everything that I think everybody was hoping it was going to be. A lot of back and forth between Ben Johnson and Brian Flores. Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Lions, had a great game as well. And Jared Goff, and I'm seeing a lot of people say, oh, Jared Goff, MVP candidate. What say you on that front when it comes to the Lions quarterback?
Yeah, Jarrett, what's interesting about that is every year towards the end of training camp, I run a survey of over a dozen current NFL executives, coaches, current and former players, people inside the league to kind of take their temperature on how is this season going to play out? Who are the teams to watch? Who are the surprise MVP candidates that people aren't talking enough about? And I bring this up because Jared Goff's name was a really popular one among current NFL executives going into this season. And, we talked a lot during September about Sam Darnold and what he was doing with the Minnesota Vikings and playing his way into the MVP conversation. We might have been focusing on the wrong sleeper quarterback in the NFC North because you think about what Jared Goff is doing, right? It's not just what he did yesterday. The numbers were great, 22 of 27, couple hundred yards, did what he needed to do throughout that game. But 2 weeks ago against the Seattle Seahawks, he goes 18 for 18, a perfect game. As much as we want to talk about the defense and the pass rush, even though Aiden Hutchinson is no longer there, Brian Branch emerging, the weapons that he has around him with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the backfield, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, and how high at a high level that offense executes itself with what Ben Johnson is calling. Jared Goff has been the straw that stirs the drink. Jared Goff has been the driving force for that team. And I think that he's one of those guys that if the Lions do what we think they are capable of doing in the NFC, if they go to the Super Bowl and they continue to perform at such a high level offensively, we're going to have to talk about Jared Goff as one of those players in that MVP conversation because traditionally it's a quarterback award. He's playing like one of the most consistently elite quarterbacks through the league this year, not making a lot of mistakes, taking advantage of the weapons, dictating the defense. He's checking a lot of boxes. And I think that at the end of the year, we're going to look back and say, you know what? Yeah, this really was the year of Jared Goff.
Yeah, I think it was his third game of 80% or higher completions. So, I mean, he's been incredibly efficient, incredibly accurate. And we're seeing now where, I think a lot of people have been waiting for like this other shoe to drop when it comes to Sam Darnold. But so far, I mean, the Vikings are incredibly efficient offensively. And even with the interception yesterday that Darnold threw, it's not like it was an egregious one. I think it was just an incredible play by Brian Branch.
Sure.
How do you feel about the Vikings going into the future? I mean, we're going into week 8 now, and I wrote about it this past week talking about, we're seeing like, Sam Darnold's, the Geno Smiths, the Baker Mayfields. These guys have these resurrections, and I think it takes some people a while to really buy into it, and rightfully so. When you have a quarterback that hasn't been traditionally great start to play well, I think everybody's a little bit skeptical. Is Sam Darnold that next guy to be able to be clumped into, with Geno and Baker, to have these resurrections for it to be sustainable?
Oh, I think he's absolutely in that mix, right? It's for a lot of the same reasons why you're looking at Baker Mayfield having a career renaissance. A lot of the same reasons why you look at somebody like Jared Goff playing his way into the MVP conversation and what Geno Smith is doing in Seattle. I talk to people inside the league, and the common thread and common theme is these guys are all now in ideal situations. They all have weapons. They all have quarterback whisperer head coaches. They're all in quarterback friendly schemes. And Darnold may be the most advantageous situation of the entire bunch because we talk about Kevin O'Connell and his ability to get the most out of quarterbacks. Well, he's building his system around what Sam Darnold is most comfortable in. And by the way, he gets to throw to Justin Jefferson over here, Jordan Addison over there.
It certainly helps.
Jones in the backfield. He's got everything he needs to succeed and play at a really high level, and he's going out and executing. And nothing that happened yesterday changes, in my opinion, the trajectory of Sam Darnold this season, right? Because the Detroit Lions going into the year, them and the San Francisco 49ers were the class of the NFC by a very wide margin before you get into talking about the Philadelphias and the Green Bays and to a lesser extent the Dallas Cowboys and onward. He went toe-to-toe with the Lions, and a couple of plays go the other way. We're talking about Sam Darnold and the Vikings having a signature victory, checking the last real unknown box of them becoming legitimate contenders and potentially even the favorites in the NFC North. They're going to get another crack at the Detroit Lions later this year, but I think that Darnold has certainly done enough to belong in that conversation of resurgent veteran quarterbacks and on the fringe of the MVP conversation, depending on what happens from here for the Vikings.
Yeah, we'll get to see this matchup again in Week 18. So potentially with the division on the line, that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, and you pointed out, I think that the last real box that the Vikings needed to check was like, yeah, they were undefeated, but it had just been by straight up ass kicking the entire time and not really having to play from behind. We saw what they were capable of doing in a close game, and yeah, they didn't come out on top, but Darnold put them in a position to do that. They were leading with less than 2 minutes left. It just so happened that Jared Goff drove them down the field to kick a game-winning field goal. So both these teams going to be very fun watches for the rest of the year. Let's go from good quarterback play from unlikely candidates to awful quarterback play from unlikely candidates. The Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers squared off in a Super Bowl rematch yesterday. And here are the numbers from both of these quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes went 16 of 27, $154 and 2 interceptions. Brock Purdy went 17 of 31, 212 and 3 interceptions. So no touchdown passes between the three of them. Patrick Mahomes plowed over Malik Mustafa for what ended up being kind of the game-clinching score. But both of these teams have a lot of questions. It just so happens that the Chiefs are, like, everybody's like, oh, the sky's falling on the Chiefs, and they're the only undefeated team left in the NFL. On the other side, though, the 49ers, everything seems to be going wrong, and now they're under 500, and that's not where you want to be. So my biggest takeaway from this is that, oh, my goodness, Patrick Mahomes isn't playing great. He's playing the worst football of his career, and the Chiefs are still finding a way to win. I had Tanir on going into this week, and I said they're kind of like later seasons of Walker, Texas Ranger, where it's like, oh, this is bad, but like somehow they're always going to win. That's kind of what it is. They're Chuck Norris putting his gun in his holster and just kicking people in the face. And it continues to work. Very much two sides of the coin when it comes to the Chiefs and the 49ers right now.
For sure. And if I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I have to be encouraged by what I saw on Sunday because, look, they found a way to manufacture a win with Patrick Mahomes having possibly the worst game of his career as a passer. And you talked about the touchdown run, the run down the sideline where he basically dead stopped twice, split defenders, and got 4 more yards. It goes to show that he can take over a game instantaneously with his legs. And I did TV in Kansas City last week, and I basically said that as long as you have 15, as long as you have Patrick Mahomes, you're the favorite to win in the AFC because he's just going to find ways to beat you in different ways week after week. But I spoke to an NFL scout last night after the Chiefs game and just tried to pick his brain about what's going on with this team because it's such an interesting dichotomy, right? They're 6-0, first time in Patrick Mahomes' career, but he's thrown 8 interceptions.
Which is crazy to think about, by the way.
Right. After everything they've accomplished, this is the best start of his career, but he leads the league in interceptions. The offense isn't exactly functioning in the same way and at the same high level we've come to expect from Andy Reid offenses through this whole run of the Reid-Mahomes era, but they're winning with defense. And the scout told me, quote, Kansas City's defense is elite, which allows their offense to be mid. They're finding different ways to win every single week because they're relying on their defense, unquote. And I think that that's pretty telling because there are only 4 teams allowing fewer points than them on the year. They're ranked 10th in total defense, 5th against the run. They swarm to the football. Chris Jones is a monster. So if you even look back to last year when the receivers led the league in drops, when it was Mahomes playing hero ball and going into God mode when he had to, it was really Chris Jones who was the MVP of that team. We saw the difference he made after sitting out the opener and down the stretch, the impact that he made all through the Super Bowl, the play of the secondary, whether the exotic blitz packages that Steve Spagnuolo drew up. I'm a lot more optimistic about the Chiefs as a favorite in the AFC today after seeing what they did yesterday, because there aren't going to be a whole lot of games where Patrick Mahomes' quarterback rating is 44.4 and they still won the game. They still beat the skeleton crew San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, let's talk about the 49ers too real quick, because, coming into the year, I think a lot of people are like, all right, yeah, they'll probably be in the NFC Championship game at minimum, and this is going to be a lot of rinse and repeat. No Christian McCaffrey, now probably no Brandon Ayuk, who they fear tore his ACL. Deebo Samuel was dealing with an illness as well. They're slowly but surely losing all of these playmakers, and we're seeing how that affects a quarterback like Brock Purdy, who I think a lot of people preemptively put into that elite tier where he's operating the system well, but now we're seeing, okay, when you take away all of the other parts of this, now we're seeing what the offense looks like without them. So what do you make of the 49ers right now as they sit in an NFC West that is really strange when you look at all these teams' records? Like, the Rams are going to be getting Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back, and they're 2-4. They're only a half game behind the 49ers now. The Seahawks are the team atop that division. And don't forget about the Arizona Cardinals. So this is a big cluster of 4 teams who can still somehow win this thing. And the 49ers feel like they're slowly losing ground.
Yeah, a couple thoughts here. You see that helmet over your left shoulder under the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Right. They're the team to beat in the division right now. And I think there's a lot of reasons why. One, we'll talk about what Kenneth Walker's doing and Geno Smith still playing at a high level, which my brain can't comprehend Geno Smith playing at the level he's played the last couple of years. I almost can't comprehend that it's happening.
Did you see that touchdown pass to DK yesterday where he just split both safeties and bulleted it? Oh, my Lord.
I can't process it because I still think of Geno Smith as Jets Geno Smith.
Right.
But he's left that way in the rearview, and he's playing at a really high level. But when it comes to San Francisco, there's a couple real structural problems here. And I think that when you look at all of the losses, Christian McCaffrey being out, which you outlined, Brandon Ayuk being hurt, Jordan Mason not being 100%, I think we're just now starting to see Trent Williams round into form after the holdout. The 49ers always beat teams not by being the fastest NASCAR on the track. They were always that Formula One car where every microchip in the engine had its purpose. Every screw on every chassis and piece of that car had a purpose to the highest performance engine, highest speed that you could imagine. And you start losing one or two of those pieces, it falls apart. We saw it last year. They went through stretches like this. But I think that what we're seeing is if they don't have all of their weapons, if they don't have all of their pieces, they're not the same team. And not only do I think we're now seeing that the Super Bowl hangover is real, because they've gotten to that mountaintop a few times, whether it's twice in the Super Bowl under Shanahan or the multiple NFC title berths. They haven't gotten the ring. They've played a lot of football over the last 5 years. There's a cumulative wear and tear issue. Yeah. They're not playing at their best. And when you look at just this season, they're starting to run out of time. Because when you look at the Seahawks, one of the reasons I think that they're the team to beat right now, they have the 14th ranked remaining strength of schedule. Their opponents have a .507 winning percentage the rest of the way. Very manageable, not a lot of tough games, and they're relatively healthy. Whereas San Francisco, not healthy. Key pieces being out. 4th toughest remaining schedule the rest of the way. So it's not going to get easier for here as they have to play the role of the hunter for once rather than the hunted.
So the Seahawks, their next 4 games, I think that'll be really telling on how the rest of the division plays out. Their next 4 games, hosting the Bills, hosting the Rams, at San Francisco, hosting the Cardinals. So the good news is they get 3 of those 4 at home. But I mean, that's going to really tell us. Yeah, that's going to tell the story of their season. After that, it gets a little bit easier, but then you still have to face Green Bay, still got to face Minnesota, and then they close out with Chicago and the Rams. So this is going to be an interesting stretch for them to really see, okay, is this going to be a team that is going to be an 8-9 win team and be a tough out but not be bad, or is this going to be a team that rises above? And I'm going to be very interested to see how that plays out for Seattle. Now I have to talk about a former Seahawk who very much made me eat crow all night last night.
Yeah, you and I both. And today.
Yeah. Like, as a Steelers fan, I was very much against taking out Justin Fields, who had played pretty well, all things considered. 10 touchdowns on the year, only 1 interception. The Steelers are 4-2, tied for the lead in the AFC North. And Mike Tomlin says we're going to see what we have in Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson looks really solid. throws for 264 yards. That's a record for any Steelers quarterback in their debut. Accounts for 3 total touchdowns. And the offense scores their most points in the post-Ben Roethlisberger era, and their most points combined in a 2-week stretch since 2020. So now you look at the Steelers, they're going to a game next week where they're going to host the Giants at home on Monday Night Football, an extremely winnable game. If they're 6-2 going into the bye, they come off that and they play the Commanders. That's not going to be an easy game. But if you're 6-2 going into the bye as the Steelers with at least a share of the AFC North lead, when do we start talking about Mike Tomlin as coach of the year?
Now.
Okay.
I think now, because, I mean, you look at what they've done. I didn't see this coming at all. And I look at what the Steelers are and what they've always been since time immemorial was dominant, stifling, swarming defense that creates a lot of turnovers and smash mouth running game, run it down your throats and beat you 13-6. That's just what the Steelers have always been. It's how they get to the playoffs. It's why they haven't made lengthy playoff runs the last couple of years, because the offense has been so limited. Look, I'm not ready to coronate Russell Wilson as the difference maker quite yet, because the Jets are leaking oil. I mean, they might as well be a Boeing jet with the way that defense played down the stretch. That defense last night was leaking oil up and down the field. Guys were dropping like flies, like Boeing, 767 Air Maxes falling out of the sky.
They also didn't have DJ Reed in the lineup last night either. So
right, and look, I'm not taking anything away from Russell Wilson, because what he did from about the midway through the third quarter onward, if you get that every week, they're a team that can make a lengthy run in the playoffs in the AFC. I just don't know that you're going to get that every week. And the Giants are the get-right opponent for every team in the league, save for the Carolina Panthers. They're the get-right team. You play them, things are going to start to go your way a little bit, you hope. But they still have the best pass rush in the league. So you're going to get a test next week of just how mobile Russell Wilson is. How can he create plays with his legs if the pocket starts collapsing around him? And how successful can he be basically throwing it up and saying, hey, George Pickens is going to go get it somewhere down the sideline down there? Because that's where that success came in last night. It was a lot of deep balls down the field, Pickens making contested catches, which if that keeps happening, great, fantastic, you're in the mix. But I think the Steelers, you can take them reasonably seriously in the AFC because of the same reason we could have taken them seriously with Justin Fields, the defense and the running game. But if Wilson's ability to stretch the field opens up opportunities for Jaylen Warren and especially Najee Harris, they're going to be even more dangerous. So I think it's compelling. It's interesting to watch it play out, but I'm not ready to draw any long-standing conclusions about Russell Wilson based on what we saw last night.
Yeah, I do think that there will be a little bit of a coming down to earth. It's just a matter of, okay, how far does that drop? If the happy medium is, okay, we'll give you, 22, 23 points a game, you can work with that, especially with that defense.
Yep.
But if it dips below, what we saw in the Kenny Pickett era, where it's like they're scoring 17 points a game, and if the opponent scores 20, they're not going to win, then that's a real problem. I'd like to think it's probably somewhere in between there, and he and Justin Fields probably give you around the same production, just in different ways.
What I'd really like to see is what I talked to a couple executives about before the season when the trade went down, is when they get down into the red zone, that's traditionally not been a great area for Russell Wilson. It certainly wasn't last year with the Denver Broncos, but the mobility that Justin Fields has, throw in a Justin Fields package, use him in the same vein as a Taysom Hill. Even a couple of those third downs early last night where, Wilson bounced some balls at the receiver's feet. There were running lanes that Justin Fields might have taken them, ran for it, got the first down, moved the chains, kept the drive going. You put Justin Fields on the field at the 12-yard line, maybe you have a different outcome than with Russell Wilson in there. So I think that if you run that 2-quarterback system, that might be a way to alleviate some of that coming back down to earth that could happen for Wilson in the next few weeks.
It's an apples to oranges comparison, but I think that when Brian Schottenheimer was with the Jets and they brought in Tebow, there was talks of them doing that with Sanchez and Tebow. It was like, all right, once we get inside like the 5, we're going to put in Tim. It's like, okay, maybe don't be that cut and dry with it where you draw that much of a line. But yeah, like work in Justin Fields in some way, at least keep defenses on their toes, which will, lead to more success. But regardless, I mean, like I said, if they beat the Giants, which they absolutely should, it would be the most Steelers thing in the world to lose to the Giants in prime time. And I'm praying to whatever God will listen that doesn't happen. But if they're 6-2 going into the bye, I feel great as a fan. The Jets on the other side, they're 2-5, and lo and behold, who would have guessed it? Trading for Devontae Adams didn't immediately solve all their problems. I don't know, man. Like I said coming into the year, this is either going to be a playoff team, and I begrudgingly and like very much against my own instincts picked them to be a playoff team, or it was going to be something that hits the fan early and it just can't be fixed. And it looks like that's where we're leaning with the Jets, where in about like a month, Rodgers is going to be talking about how like cashews have hidden listening devices in them and how we're all like, it's going to be something goofy like that. So that's where I'm leaning right now. I think that's where everybody would lean as you're watching a 2-5 team crumble before your very eyes.
It's really bizarre, isn't it? You fire the head coach, you go all in and you trade for Devontae Adams. You bring Hassan Reddick back on the same day in terms of getting him back in the building and trying to get him happy and motivated to reinforce a defense that we've talked about how they struggled down the stretch last night. Yeah. It almost seems like they're trying to play the long game with this season. Like, oh, it'll turn around. Rodgers will flick the switch. Devontae Adams will become Devontae Adams of 2014 again. Oh, the defense will be what it was last year when they had to do everything and they were still a top 5 defense for 8 or 10 weeks last year. Meanwhile, 41% of the season is already over. They're 2-5. They're 3.5 games back in the AFC East. The clock is ticking. And oh, by the way, Aaron Rodgers is falling apart more and more every week. He's regressing every week. Devontae Adams might eventually make the difference, but I don't look at this team right now as it's constructed and with everything going on around them with the bad vibes from the coaching change and the scepter of Rodgers potentially continuing to regress. I just don't think that what they're doing is enough to spark a big enough turnaround to make the playoffs. So they're one of those teams that they have some talent at the skill positions. They have a pretty good defense. They don't have a lot of depth, and the quarterback is not the quarterback that they thought that they were getting.
Yeah, it's one thing if you're playing the long game and it's like week 1 and 2. We're like, okay, we just traded for Devontae Adams ahead of the regular season, and it might take a little bit. No, it's going into week 8. Like, you got to get your stuff into gear. The one thing I will say that might play to their advantage is that the rest of the AFC is kind of like scavenged off each other, where like there's like 4 teams right now that I would say are locks to make the playoffs in each division. That's the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Texans. Yeah. Everybody else, you're kind of like playing for scraps and trying to get those spots. So you pointed out though, the Bills are already 5-2. That they're going to have, for all intents and purposes, the Bills have won the AFC East, barring something catastrophic. So if you're the Jets now, you're going up against, okay, can you beat out, can you scratch your way back in and get one of these wild card spots? Can you outlast, a team like the Bengals? Can you outlast the Colts? No, can you outlast the Broncos, which they have a head-to-head win over you, so you better hope that they don't win too many more games. Yeah. So it's going to be stuff like that where if they do get in, it'll be as the 6 or 7 seed as like a 9-win team. And then you got to travel to either Buffalo for a third time, you're going to go to Arrowhead, or you're going to go to Baltimore. Like, it's not going to be easy. Or, if the Steelers really keep winning, then you go back to Pittsburgh. Like, just depends on what the situation will be. So that's the only thing that I would say, okay, they could still figure it out, just because the rest of the AFC outside of those top 4 teams is kind of up for grabs.
I think it's far more likely that the AFC North sends 3 teams than it is that the AFC East sends 2.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the AFC East, though, because Josh Allen, my goodness gracious. The Buffalo Bills get Amari Cooper, and then his first catch as a Bill is to give them a lead that they don't give back after a slow start. This is just kind of the Bills' MO, I think, at this point. It takes them like a quarter to be like, oh, all right, well, let's do this thing. They had, I think, 3 consecutive 3-and-outs to start the game. The Titans marched up and down on them twice and got a 10-0 lead. And then they kind of got into gear, scored 34 unanswered points, and everything was good. They're singing Kumbaya. Josh Allen on the year right now, 15 total touchdowns, no interceptions, leads the NFL in QBR. He was my MVP pick coming into the year. It looks like that could very well be the case. What say you about the Bills and Josh Allen?
Yeah, Jarrett, I wrote in my column this morning over at Between the Hash Marks on Substack that the addition of Amari Cooper, number one, he has to feel like he passed through football purgatory and wound up in football heaven with Josh Allen now as his quarterback, and he made the instant impact. And I think that beyond the touchdown catch, I wrote about this last week when the trade went down. Keon Coleman is going to be one of the biggest winners of this trade because of the attention that teams now have to pay to Amari Cooper as that deep threat, shade of safety coverage over to his side of the field. It's going to open up opportunities. And then lo and behold, Coleman busts out with the strongest game of his rookie season, 125 receiving yards yesterday. Really looks like a field stretcher and a guy that can change the outcome of a game in a snap or two with Amari Cooper on the field. The other thing is, you talk about the MVP race. I'll look at the Super Bowl aspirations for this team. They've kind of butt up that against that glass ceiling of whenever you play the Chiefs, be it in the division round or in the AFC title game, that's as far as you're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at Amari Cooper, you look at Coleman, you look at Dalton Kincaid coming into his own, you look at a solid stable of running backs and James Cook really looking like that bona fide franchise running back. Cooper looks like he could be the missing piece, that he could be the catalyst that not only lifts Josh Allen across the finish line as an MVP, but could finally drag the Buffalo Bills across the finish line in the AFC and into the Super Bowl. Because as we talked about, there are no real complete teams other than maybe Baltimore in that conference where you can say they're the prohibitive favorites to go to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. The Bills have the weapons. The defense is going to always make enough plays to keep you in the game, and adding a game-changing weapon to what was already a pretty exciting and well-rounded receiving core, that could be a pretty big difference maker for the Bills.
Yeah, and when it comes to like the playoff matchups, like we saw how it went with Baltimore early on. It's just they just out-physicaled Buffalo, and the Bills weren't able to adjust, and if they did, it wasn't in time. They're already down too much. So that's kind of a matchup that worries me. But at the same time, the Bills are still without Matt Lombardo, who they plan to get back by December. So as long as everything stays on track, they're going to be getting healthier and getting their best defender back going into the playoffs. So that maybe that turns out to be a blessing in disguise that they didn't have him. They, bring him in as almost like a closer type in baseball. Right. So if they can remain at the level of health that they're at right now, I know Terrell Bernard was dealing with another injury yesterday. Don't know how long that will be. But they get Taron Johnson back. Eventually, they'll get Milano back. Like that defense is going to keep getting stronger. Taylor Rapp's playing really strong at safety. Christian Benford, by the way, one of the best stories in football this year, really emerging as like a top-tier corner alongside Russell Douglas. So this is a unit that has talent on that side of the ball. And we obviously know what 17 brings to the table, like Ray Davis and Ty Johnson as well out of the backfield. Like they have a lot of depth on that side of the ball as well. So I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to the Bills, like you pointed out, is can they get through that glass ceiling? Because we know that they can beat Kansas City in the regular season. They consistently do that.
Yep.
And they've beaten Baltimore in the playoffs before. It's just a matter of can they finally get across that finish line? And hopefully they do. And we know that that's really the end goal here is, not winning in October. It's winning in January and eventually February.
And I think that Brandon Beane deserves a lot of credit here because when you look at, trading away Stephon Diggs and all of the question marks that raised and drafting Keon Coleman while losing out on Xavier Worthy because they kept moving back, you have Coleman who is starting to come into his own and getting better every week. But then you go and get that game-changing wide receiver to replace Stephon Diggs' impact in Amari Cooper, who might wind up being not only a better fit, but certainly a better culture fit in what they're building there. So I think that Beane going all in, looking what happened in New York and seeing them get Devontae Adams, if you thought that was going to close the gap between the Bills and the Jets in the division, they went and they just widened it right back up again by getting Cooper. And they have the better quarterback, they have the better defense, and they have the pedigree in terms of postseason experience to make a run in the playoffs this year.
We talked about Stephon Diggs briefly. Let's talk about the Texans and the Packers because that was another fun game yesterday where Jordan Love, man, he is an experience. It is when you watch a Jordan Love game, I assume as a Packers fan, it reminds you a lot of the Brett Favre days where it's like, all right, I know he's going to make like 4 throws that blow my mind, but he's going to make 3 throws that make me want to blow my mind out. Like, my goodness gracious. And he did that. He threw a really ugly interception early on, but Green Bay rebounds. Love finishes 24-33, 220, 3 touchdowns, and an additional interception on top of that early one, and the Packers win 24-22. I've said this plenty of times, and I've said it about Allen a lot, but just about quarterback play in general. I will take a guy who might turn the ball over a few more times, but I know is going to give me 5 to 6 throws a game that very few guys can. So give me Jordan Love over, somebody who's in the middle of the pack, who's very conservative, doesn't really change the aspect of the game, but protects the ball. I understand he's got 8 interceptions on the year, and he's done that while missing 2 games. But Jordan Love, man, he is one of my favorite players to watch because of that, in terms of he is a he's a gunslinger in an era that is trying to, I feel like, summon away from the gunslinger era, but the mentality that he brings where he's like, I can fit that ball in there. Sometimes he's going to be right. Sometimes he won't be, but definitively he makes the Packers a really serious threat in the NFC. And now, they're sitting atop the NFC at a 5-2 record where, this is a real player for a potential Super Bowl appearance.
You know what I love about the Green Bay Packers and about Jordan Love in that whole situation is that they've built an infrastructure around him with young wide receivers. They've went out and they drafted 2 really young tight ends that as he develops, they're going to develop as well. I think that the ceiling continuously, week over week and year over year, continues to get raised for Jordan Love, his potential as a quarterback, and what the Packers are going to be over the next 2, 3, 5 years down the line. And it's not just the receivers. It's not just Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson and Latavian Wicks and Jaden Reed and all these guys, but the kind of flying under the radar, but shouldn't be, Tucker Kraft. I mean, he's playing his way into becoming a top 5 or top 10 tight end in the NFL. And I've said this for years, going back to covering the Philadelphia Eagles when they had Carson Wentz and Zach Ertz, that I think there's nothing more instrumental to a young quarterback's development than pairing him with an elite pass-catching tight end, because it's a security blanket. It's a guy that can make plays on high percentage throws over the middle. You look at the throw that he made in the back of the end zone to Tucker Kraft and the diving catch that he made early in that game against the Texans. To me, those are the type of plays that are going to become a major driving force for what they do on offense. And you look at Kraft's numbers, 21 catches, 264 yards and 4 touchdowns, while not being completely healthy for this entire year, without having Jordan Love on the field for every game this season. It just seems like as he continues to grow with those weapons and Kraft gets more experience and more confidence, they're going to be even more dangerous as they roll along, because there aren't many more quarterback-friendly head coaches in the league than Matt LaFleur, and they have a lot of the pieces, and they're young. It's not a 1-2 year window for them. San Francisco battling through their issues, and they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. Philadelphia seems to constantly be spinning their wheels in terms of what they want to be in terms of a defense and offensive scheme and all those things. The Cowboys seem like they're in a decline because of what they didn't do this offseason. There's a real window here for the Packers to become kind of what the San Francisco 49ers have been over the last 4 or 5 years for the next 4 or 5 years in the NFC.
Yeah, they were my pick to come out of the NFC this year to make it to the Super Bowl, and I don't see a reason to pull back on that now. I've tried to think of like a good comparison for the Packers, and I think I've got it. You ever seen the movie Young Guns?
Yes.
I think that's what they are right now. They are, because it's a young core of guys, and all of them play a different role. And I think that Jordan Love is Emilio Estevez. I think that is who we've come to know. Jordan Love is the Emilio Estevez of the group. If you want to say that Dontavian Wicks or Jaden Reed is Kiefer Sutherland or Charlie Sheen, we'll figure out the entire core of this young guns group. But I think that's kind of what the best comparison you can make is that Green Bay Packers are the young guns of the NFL right now.
I love it. And, I said going into yesterday that I kind of think that they're the mirror image of the Houston Texans. Young quarterback, decent amount of weapons, really good defense. That's kind of the backbone of their culture and what they're doing. And to me, it's not all that's surprising that it took a game-winning field goal to beat a team that's built as similarly as they are.
Absolutely. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I think that's, a good place to put a bow on a really exciting week 7. We got 2 Monday night games tonight for some reason. I think that's stupid. They should stop doing that.
I agree.
But anything else you want to touch on before we get on out here? What do you got coming on the old Substack?
Yeah, we have a lot of fun stuff coming up. We have a former New York Giants running back, Andre Williams, coming on the podcast tomorrow to talk Giants and, kind of the mess up there and how they rebuild. And we have some fun features coming up to the trade deadline, some moves that executives think should be made, some moves that they would make if they were GMs. So some fun stuff coming down the pipeline between the hash marks. And always enjoy checking out your work here on the Pump Fake and as well as Sporting News and all the other places where you can find your fantastic writing and content, and a big fan of yours, always have been, and love seeing your trajectory.
Oh, appreciate that, buddy. Sincerely. No, you've been somebody who's very much been a vocal supporter of me since, I was young in this. So I genuinely do appreciate that. In terms of what you can find from me, I'm doing a piece on Deshaun Watson as we speak, in terms of we don't have to make him a martyr. He's not. So that'll be coming out on Sporting News within probably the hour that this podcast comes out. And then, yeah, follow along for all the Steelers coverage, the Bills coverage, national NFL coverage, whatever that we got going on. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Like I said at the top of the show, if you are not already subscribed to the YouTube, please be sure to do that and leave a review wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Matt, I appreciate the hell out of you, my friend. We'll do this again very soon.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for listening to The Pump Fake. Talk soon.